Welcome to the Myself Wellness Podcast. I'm Charles Patti, the voice of Myself Wellness, along with my co-hosts Christina Thomas and Jamie Venziel. 9 years ago, I began my journey to self-awareness and healing. Like many who have faced personal struggles, I felt lost and struggled to find lasting healing. It wasn't until I discovered alternative healing methods that I began to see a real change in my life. This show will help you unlock your true potential through healthy lifestyle practices and transformations. Join us as we explore personal stories, expert advice, and practical tips to help you step into your true potential and level up. Welcome to the Myself Wellness Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Myself Wellness Podcast. Today, we have Katie Walker with Revitalist and Adam Marr with a veterans organization nonprofit. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So
It's great to be here.
with you all again.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
So, Katie, tell us a little bit about you and how you got started and your background with Revitalist and everything that you're doing now.
Oh, goodness. You know, if I told you how my days went, you'd probably think I was like schizophrenic. Sometimes I wonder, right? I'm not going to tell them everything that happened today. But yeah, so my background, I feel like I'm taking all the paths, I guess, that the universe wants me to take. Shoved, I feel like, in sometimes certain directions. But a nurse betrayed. Then I went to anesthesia school back in 2011, practiced anesthesia for a while, opened Revitalist in 2018, and got my psychiatry degree in 2022. And I am still in the infant stages of learning how to be a successful business person.
I feel that.
Stripes.
Yeah.
Stripes along the way.
What really I love asking people this question, and it's just like, what really ignited that desire to get into this industry? Was there something that what sparked that passion within you?
You know, gosh, I created a bomb. Believe it or not, I created a bomb at work one time. And unfortunately, the anesthesia group that I worked for, they appointed me as the champion HRO, right? Human Resources Officer. So here I am leading the good fight in the anesthesia world. And I started discovering some things that were just really like disheartening, very, very disheartening at the anesthesia world. And my innocent self, I'm really innocent. People may not believe that, but when I hear things, I just know, growing up, things that, yeah, that's the way they work, right? So it's like, when you become more professional, people become more professional. Wrong. People become more manipulative. People become, more siloed. They try to get their own ways, and so when I started asking people, I guess I'd worked at this group for about 3 or 4 years. And I was fine, right? I was at the time I was married to a heart surgeon, and when I first started working, they were like, "Oh, are you come to just to do lap choles and work from 7 to 3, and it's gallbladders?" And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna do it all. That's what we're trained to do." So I went to 5 hospitals. I did I did trauma, neuro, cardiac, pediatrics, OB, all the things. And I was their only actually CRNA in a group of 65 CRNAs that actually did all the specialties. And so, seeing all that, trying to help to advocate for those things, when they appointed me as the champion HRO, I started hearing stories of people that they're don't, I'm not saying anything. If I say something it's all about retaliation, repercussion, people working overtime, not getting paid, people getting signed up for a 12-hour shift and 5 weeks later, and they've never worked 12-hour shifts in their life. And admin saying "Oh no, you signed up for it," but it was just weird. Right. And if you ever said you were uncomfortable, which as a nurse, we're told to say, it's no, you say when you're uncomfortable with a situation, and you have every protective right to say that, right? Because it just means you're not trained well. If somebody said they were uncomfortable, right, with taking care of a 6-week-old baby, which, they'd come in and laser off certain birthmarks and things like that. But somebody's I've not done a baby in 2 years. I'm uncomfortable with doing a 6-week-old. And babies are very, very, they're sensitive, they're fragile. And if you said I was uncomfortable, what they would do is they would put you, they're "Oh, you're uncomfortable?" And they would just stack you with babies. And they would not train you additionally. And I'm hey, this is someone's kid. They're "Well, you're anesthesia. Are you not confident in your job?" Right? So I went around, I started hearing all these stories, and I was just baffled. And I went around and I started asking specifics because I just knew, my little innocent self just knew that admin, like, they were going to do something about this, right? Because this is like a horrible thing. And people were afraid to talk to me. I eventually got them to speak to me about really significant examples. And so I had 39 people, right? And I didn't put MD, CRNA, I didn't put anything. I just said 1 through 39. And I took it to my boss. And at that time, he wanted me to say, he was like, "Who's the cancer? I need to cut it out." Right? And he's like, "Tell me who told you this." And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not telling you." And I didn't say anything about it. Right. But seeing how they handled that and then realizing like, I don't want to be a part of this, like that's not what I'm here for, kind of thing. So I started like investigating, ketamine, seeing different things. And so I was in that environment, and then I was doing a glioma on a patient. And it's a brain tumor. Most people die from it pretty quickly. And success, right, on this case, it was like a 6-hour case. And my success was, one, you keep them alive, you help them not to feel pain, help them to not have reading recall. And then they move 20 minutes after the case, right? All extremities. And that way, you didn't hurt a nerve or anything like that. So I'm sitting there like waiting for this guy to wake up. And I don't know. I mean, I remember where I was standing. I was like, what quality of life is this, right? Like, I went to school for 11 years. Like, I know how to work with so many different populations. And my success today is going to make sure that this guy who's dying in 6 weeks, right? More than likely, that he wakes up and he's not hurt any worse than he is. And at that time, I looked at ketamine and I was like, what would happen if you took my skill set, right? Nobody meets anesthesia until right before they die in the hospital. It's like pulmonary, everybody else will code everybody, right? And then if they call in anesthesia, like it's hitting the roof kind of thing. And it's like, why do people have to wait and meet me right before death? Like, what happens if you take my skill set because I'm critically care trained? Like, like we get the worst of the worst of the worst, and we're very comfortable with it because we've been trained that way. What if you take me from back here and you put me up front? So when there's a child that comes in, when there's a mom that comes in, when there's somebody who comes in and says, if you can't help me right now, I'm going to go blow my brains out. And I've had that happen before. Well, most providers would say, I need you to go to the ER. Like, call 911, go to the ER. And I'm like, no, let's go. Like, come on, let's go do ketamine now. So, so seeing those things and really just having that, my soul kind of change, I mean, something led me here for some reason. And, and my passion now, it's not only more than it was then, it's like more with gasoline and steroids on top of it. And I think, when I opened the clinic, and you all know this, you're sitting there talking to people and you're hearing their stories and you're seeing that you have nobody, like nobody's advocating for these people. They're having to advocate for themselves. And then when they do go to advocate for them, we make them feel bad. And we're like, I'm not looking at your papers. Did you go to medical school? Did you get training? So it's like, we're like bullying them to a point. And then dumbly on my end, I thought psychiatrists and therapists spoke to each other. Well, then I found out therapists and psychiatrists don't respect each other. One believes in talking, one believes in medicines, but most of them don't believe on both sides. So I'd be sitting there talking to these people who had like 9 specialists. I'm like, who is talking to who? What do you mean you have 38 diagnoses? Like, and they're like, just doing the best I can do. And they're not wrong. They are doing the best that they can do. But we've left these people, right? The system has failed every person that we see with ketamine to a point. The system's failed them. And so, that's why I'm here today. It's like build a new system, like what we said, healthcare 2.0. But it's, build the new system, bring in people, love, accept them, do not turn them away. There's a lot of providers that are risk adverse and they would prefer to turn people away. And my providers know, like, you do not do that. Like, if somebody comes in and they're asking for your help, I don't care if they want to be a purple kangaroo. You help that person because they're asking for your guidance. They're asking for your specialty. And so, yeah, it's recreating what we know we need in the system and pushing all the stuff that everybody thinks works out.
See, I love that. It's like when I meet a medical professional that is like, I hate to say it's like, but like people are like indoctrinated into this program, and it's like, okay, this is what the program is, and this is what works, and this is how we do things. And then all of a sudden I meet somebody like you, and you're like taking a step back and you're looking at it and you're like, wait a second, like this isn't working. Like this is a broken system, and we need to like change this paradigm because we're not treating people properly. And so breaking free of that, you know, I have a lot of respect for you and I appreciate what you've done, you know. And so like, I guess what I'd like to do is take a second and talk to Adam and say, so like psychedelics and or ketamine or any of these healing modalities, what kind of like, I would love to ask you first, like, you know, give a little like introduction about like the organization you're a part of, but also like what made you passionate about getting into these healing modalities?
Yeah, sure. And it's a pleasure to be with you all here today, and even listening to Katie speak, and you know, just hearing about like I also hear like there's a cultural like component too, like the culture of the medicine and that community, and how it's like you know, putting people in situations where they don't feel like they're completely equipped, and then like challenging like their capability set to be able to deliver that, and just creating this like stressful environment where it's very toxic, let alone just like to provide, you know, your expertise, but then to like to add that layer, you know, on top of it. And I would say like, you know, that's probably like similar to the military, you know, community as well. So that's the community that I come from. So I was an Apache helicopter pilot for 10 years, and my job was you know, to be proficient in attack and reconnaissance, like as a profession. And so I did, and was good at it, and deployed to Iraq. And I loved, you know, being able to do that because I thought it was the greatest thing that I could do for our country at a time of war. And about 10 years in, I was ready to transition and move on to something different. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but my older brother was a Special Forces Green Beret, and he got medically retired for TBI and PTSD. And so I saw him, you know, this larger than life figure that I looked up to my whole life, you know, able to speak foreign languages, run through walls, you know, do our nation's, you know, bidding, and the worst, you know, types of things that we do in combat. And then I see him like having his purpose taken away from him, having his cognitive function and abilities taken away, 13 different symptom masking medications, and pouring alcohol, you know, fuel on the fire. And you can see how somebody gets into a state where they become a statistic that, you know, hopefully we're all too familiar with at this point. 17 to 44 veterans a day, you know, take their lives to suicide. So his was the case where he's still alive today, and so fortunate for that, because, you know, so many don't have that opportunity. And we found an alternative therapy on the neuro restorative side of traumatic brain injury. And so, you know, being service oriented and having a solution set, not even really fully knowing and understanding like what we're embarking on or possessing, but it was just something like, hey, there's a little bit of relief to this thing that was about to destroy me. Like, let's share that with as many people as we can. And so we started a nonprofit in 2015 called Warrior Angels Foundation. And that was really the entry point into trying to come up with solutions for my community. And yeah, within that, like we wrote a book called Tales from the Blast Factory, which chronicled my brother's journey and what he experienced. And then the person that we worked with on that linked us up with somebody who ended up taking that story and expanding on it into 10 different stories of overcoming brain injury in the award-winning documentary called Quiet Explosions. And so that was a very good path on being able to heal the brain from physiological trauma, right? So what happens to us physically when our brain gets rocked in our skull. But there was a psychological component that we hadn't yet really kind of learned to address. And psychedelics were instrumental in that. And so like I flew in the Apache, right? So I'm up in the sky in this like protective armored, you know, helicopter away from the sights and sounds in the battlefield. So it was a different experience for me than for my brother, you know, who was down there. And so I didn't have TBI. And so while I was helping him with the mission, and I kind of changed my course and trajectory to get this nonprofit with him started and going, you know, for me, it was figuring out how to like pull my engine power levels from like full throttle, like back to idle, right? So in my 20s, as a way of life or a profession, like we attacked things. Like we literally signed our emails like attack. And so when I got out, whether it was nonprofit work or, leaving the nonprofit to go into, corporate to provide for the family, it's like I just attacked everything as a way of life and existing. And that's good for certain situations and scenarios. Like we need that, but we also have to be able to like bring our engine power levers back to idle, like turn the engines off and do systems level depot maintenance. And I just hadn't really learned, how to do that yet. And so that's what I kind of equivocate like my first psychedelic experiences to, is just these absolutely profound, transformative experiences that, connected me to a love center in a way that, I didn't know was possible. And to do so on this multidimensional spiritual plane to help me remember that, I was more than just this physical being, like here to accomplish tasks. But even with that being said, for me personally in my personal journey, I was still stuck in just trying to provide for the family and, working in corporate consulting and being in, as I hear Katie talk about, the environment she was in. I remember being in corporate boardrooms and people acting like people were dying because, the program was going from a red cell, or a green cell to a red cell, right? The program was getting behind. And I was like, this is strange behavior to me because we were all safe from dying here. And I was over there where people were not. And they responded much more caringly and lovingly towards one another with level heads and minds. And so it was this thing of like having these profound experiences, but not yet having the systems and tools and integration and coaching to be able to like correlate that into a change in myself. And so while this personal journey is going on, continuing this service-oriented work for our community, more and more nonprofits start to come online, no longer being like the drinking bros of yesteryear that show up with, the American Legion hats and going and playing bingo and smoking. Now we're like very mission focused, like it's a heal mission. And so how do I be a part of that? How do I support that? And in 2021, my brother helped pass legislation in the state of Texas for a study of these psychedelic compounds, MDMA and psilocybin at the Baylor College School of Medicine. And the reason that the Texas legislature passed that is because my brother and other special forces veterans showed up and shared their transformative journeys and stories of healing with these, taking on the risk, having to go outside of the country in many cases to get access to this. Why? Because all the things that we had, treatment-resistant depression, symptom masking medications, talk therapy, it didn't go to the root cause. It just was this preventative blocker. And so these things were doing something absolutely incredible. And we felt an obligation to go and step up and speak about that. And so, now I'm the director of operations for the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. It's a mouthful, but it's actually,
Sure is.
it's actually how I met Katie, through doing this work about a year and a half ago, connecting with the other leaders in this space that are looking to the future and saying, I don't think the status quo is working.
Yeah.
It's clearly not. So how can we show up and do more and be more? And the coalition's journey was kind of like, the people that looked to start it, 3-star former Marine general and attorney out of Brett Waters out of New York said, we're going to create this organization. It's going to be a policy kind of think tank looking at deaths of despair, suicide, and the potential of psychedelic therapy and medicine as it. And they said, we think we need a coalition to help support the advocacy work. So they reached out to me and my brother, among others, a few initial others, initially just saying like, hey, we want to start this organization. And we think that this is the way that we make the change at the state and the federal level. And I went to one event in Pennsylvania in 2022, and we met with legislators. We talked on the rotunda staircase, holding signs, vets for psychedelics or whatever we ended up landing on. And, I saw what this could be. I saw the climate. I had been serving in this, capacity long enough to see that this system solutions like weren't fixing it. And we need like bold, innovative solutions, but also like done the right way. So really for the last 2.5 years or so, just have been giving myself to that, to reach out, at first to other people that were like me and my brother that experience something in some way, shape, or form, were confronted with, the dark night of the soul, and somehow, some way emerged on the other side with some kind of connection to these medicines in some way. And so the thing that I've seen serving in this space long enough is, once somebody's able to get on that other side and they start to achieve this peace within and reorient to their purpose, you start to envision, the future that you want to be a part of. And that oftentimes starting an organization, it could be a nonprofit, a for-profit, right? But you have this skill set and you have all these things that brought you to this, current, present, now moment. So if you repurpose those for, in the veterans case, a heal mission instead of a kill mission, what can we do with that? And so the coalition's now 50 organizations. We have really small nonprofits to really large ones like the Navy SEAL Foundation or Grunt Style Foundation. We have therapists and clinicians. We have doctors. We have lawyers. We have CEOs. We have executive directors. And it's really quite a beautiful thing that I get to be in service of. And that's helping to rally all these people to try and find like a unitary common goals that we can attack and all agree on, which is hard to do when you have a lot of people, especially in the nonprofit world, that are competing for donation dollars. And but kind of like Katie was saying, like, that's the way it has to be, because it has to be different than what it was done before. And I think when we do that and we bring the best and the brightest of us and we come together trying to be as humble in service of one another as we can, leading with love and gratitude, then I think we have the ability to think about the current systems we face, what these things are and what there aren't, and how we should protect people, but allow them the opportunity to be able to overcome some of these things that have been, destroying our world.
For sure. The one thing I love that you just said was like, this is a heal mission, not a kill mission.
Yeah.
And, and like, I really believe whether you want to look at this as like a war that we're fighting. I mean, I kind of do, but this is the only war, the war that can only be won with love. I think loving energy and coming from that place of a heart-centered place. And, it's like having professionals and, military personnel, like professionals as yourselves. This is why I'm so hopeful for this movement right now, is because I feel like we're in a different place than we've ever been before. It's like, you actually have people that are respected within the community, veterans, medical professionals that are taking a stance and saying like, listen, like this is actually a medicine. This is really working. It's completely changing the game for people that have been suffering for so long. And it's going to take those kind of voices to actually propel a movement like this forward. I'm incredibly hopeful. I'm a little bit disappointed that MDMA didn't go through recently. And I think that can help a lot of people, but I definitely think that it's going to end up happening in the future, and hopefully something positive will end up coming out of that situation.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think part of me, maybe like this, the more conventional side, like wants to be, kind of like, oh, it didn't go through and there's so many people that could benefit from it right now. And all those things are true, but I also believe in like, divine timing. And I know, and I feel like that it didn't go through because it's not ready to. And, I think that can be a hard thing to hear, but what I say is like, okay, it didn't go through. So what can Adam, as a servant of this, like now do to help work on like what comes next? And I think that's one of the things that I'm so excited about what you guys are all doing, because, you do say like, okay, if MDMA has to go back to stage 3, you're talking, even if they were able to raise the capital right now, philanthropic dollars, potentially too, maybe investment dollars, 3 years for a new drug application with the FDA. Now, psilocybin's a little bit, further behind MDMA, but now it has a potential to maybe leapfrog it because of where they're at. And they've brought some of the pharmaceutical guys in with their clinical trial design. So some of these things that we maybe saw in the MAPS Lycos trials were already, kind of averted in conversations with the FDA. So we could potentially see like a psilocybin new drug application through like Compass or one of the others, maybe in like 2 years. 2 years. Like 2015, I got out, and my brother and I started it. We were kind of naive to think we were the only ones working on it, because we weren't, but we just entered into the space. So it's like, where is everybody else? And where are the generals? Like, where are the admirals? Like, why is our government not raising this flag? Okay, you're not going to do it. Like, fine. Like, we'll do it. and we'll keep working on it until we get here. But you guys have found the therapeutic benefits of, ketamine through your own journeys and work. And the research is starting to catch up in all the different ways. And Katie and I just did a podcast, on pain, management and the different applications that it has there from old, to young. And I'm just like looking at this and saying, we have this available right here, right now.
And I think a lot of people sleep on that fact.
Yes.
A lot of people are really excited for what's to come
right.
in the future with all these other compounds, but we have ketamine right here, right now, and a lot of providers doing it.
Yeah.
And people sleep on that fact. I mean, when you dose ketamine correctly, people are having out of body mystical experiences on a daily basis, at least at My Self Wellness.
I don't know what the reasoning behind all of this is. It's funny because it's like there's so much lack of information about the capabilities of ketamine out there and like what it's actually doing for people. And I don't know. It's like, I think because it is here now and it's such a threat, we're kind of like sweeping it under a threat to like other, I don't know, medications and stuff like that out there, or like it actually working.
I think people want what they can't have.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest draw to other compounds.
Well,
I think it also comes with like a history too, right? And maybe even the occasional like, negative, perception because of like misuse or whatever. And I think it's incumbent upon like leaders like us to be able to say, well, like, let's re-baseline this, like with like the data, the research and the therapeutic benefits and the personal stories of healing and transformation.
Yeah.
And then like, let's be out front advocates for it to shift the paradigm. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's what we're really, trying to do, which is change culture. And changing culture is like one of the hardest things that you can do. And the only way you can do it is one individual at a time.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like I would love to ask you a question because like I have my own theories behind it, but like recently, like I was on a phone call with a congresswoman from California, and basically she was, she's fighting to get psilocybin and MDMA rescheduled. And then I was like, I want to be a part of this and I want to support any way I can, but I have a question for you. Like, why aren't we fighting for ketamine to get covered by insurance? And she actually told me on this call, she goes, did you know it would be harder for us to do that than get these other compounds rescheduled? Like, what do you think is behind that? Or like, why do you think that ketamine isn't being pushed to get covered by insurance?
And is that even true?
Yeah. And see, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But that being said, though, this is what she said to me on the call.
But she's trying to get decriminalized or trying to.
No, she's trying to get the other compounds rescheduled. So basically, like that's what the fight is, and the push is for is to get MDMA and psilocybin rescheduled. But when it came to actually trying to get ketamine covered by insurance, she said that would be a harder battle to fight.
There's no money in ketamine. I think that's a big piece, right? Because ketamine was approved in 1970. Somebody owned it for 20 years, right? Well, you have to have the FDA patent, right, per se, before you make the drugs. Somebody owned, actually, that didn't come about until like the 80s, where you own a drug for 20 years. But say like Spravato, right? So Janssen owns Spravato. They started doing all the trials with Spravato. It usually takes about 10 years to get through those trials. It usually costs about $100 million. And then their drug becomes, FDA approved and becomes a trade name. They own the trade name for about another 10 years. That's why the drugs are so expensive, because they're trying to recoup their cost of the $100 million that they spent on the studies. Ketamine, unless somebody can get in there and alter the chemical structure of it, which needs to happen, right? It does. Nobody's going to be able to make money off of it because it's a generic drug. So if you're trying to get psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, all these guys, pharmaceutical companies are going to be able to make money off of those drugs because those chemical structures have not been approved yet.
Yeah.
So unless somebody can, add a little like magnesium, kind of a chemical structure to ketamine, like that's why, and they can get it covered like ketamine, right? You can get an additional indication. They need like 100,000 individual cases. And then you would put that together and then you would present that accordingly. But that's more than likely why there's no money in it.
So it's time for everybody to get together and tweak a molecule and let's do a rebrand on this stuff.
Well, and I mean, I think that's,
make your own drug.
It's so fundamentally flawed. It's like, oh, we have this thing that's generic and it's like readily available. And we need to like make it more complex and, patent it and make only like one person allow so that we can get the revenue generation. And every single person that's hearing this is saying like, that is so stupid. Like we have something that's like generic and readily available. Like let's make it available. And how is it like that we can't, get insurance like for that? Like I'm not.
It's investigational. They just keep coming back saying it's investigational. Insurance does.
Hmm.
But yeah, so talking about drugs, right? So you've got all drugs have a right side and a left side, and they face each other, right? They're isomers, and they're complete mirrored images of each other. But one side is usually more potent and shorter acting. The other side is less potent and longer acting. So S-ketamine, right? So you got the R-ketamine, you got S-ketamine. S-ketamine is the left side of the drug. It's the less potent, longer acting. Janssen was extremely smart. And when what happened, right? So Yale University discovered in the late 1990s that ketamine causes the brain to regenerate. Well, some smarty probably saw that because I'm pretty sure the Spravato trials, or they got the patent for S-ketamine, I want to say around 2003, 2004. So when they got that, right, they did it for just the left side of the drug. And then they got approval for it in 2013. S-ketamine is going to be the biggest, most successful drug that Janssen has ever seen. And probably Johnson & Johnson, right? So Johnson & Johnson owns Janssen. And then they just got approval for an additional 10-year royalties on that drug. So S-ketamine is going to be $1,200 a dose, right? That's pretty much what it costs. Yep. And then, it's a 4-month, it's like 20 doses over 4 months. That's why it's so significant in the cost. And the thing about S-ketamine, like, when I talk to Johnson & Johnson and Janssen, gosh, I'm telling all my stories. They wouldn't talk to me as an anesthesia provider. I had to go meet them at Starbucks off the property. I'm like, this is so stupid. I feel like I'm doing a drug deal. And the only thing I want you all to do is like, just give me education on your drug. And they're like, well, you can sell our drug, but we just can't educate you on it. I'm like, do you know how stupid that sounds?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to sell it?
Yeah. And they're like, well, you're anesthesia. We can't come on your property, but you can ask us questions. So then I went to like a random conferences and I would always go find the Spravato booth, so now I'm friends with a lot of them. And actually there's a really high ranking veteran with Spravato that we can talk to. But anyway, so, started with all those pieces, but the thing about S-ketamine, right? And I told Johnson & Johnson, which they said, do not say that, or Janssen. I said, you all are aware you just got the first psychedelic approved in 2013. And they're like, no, it's an antidepressant. I'm like, no, it's a psychedelic, and, but it's about 40% effective, right? It's about 40% effective. I went way down into the studies. I read all the paperwork. I went down into the rabbit studies. And, over time, if you use it for a long period of time, it makes like the bones weaker or something like that. But I'm sure that, different with a rabbit versus a human. And people do okay, with S-ketamine. It's not going to hurt them necessarily. But unlike what we see with ketamine and psychedelics, there's no long-term benefit with Spravato. Like once they stop, they've got to come back. It's the same thing as SSRIs and SNRIs.
It's the Band-Aid.
It is.
And listen, like it's kind of, when I talk about this stuff with people and we try to figure it out, it's a little bit weird how like the dosage, like the highest dose that you can receive off of Spravato is still basically like a sub-psychedelic or therapeutic dose. I mean, like, it's like kind of like right almost getting into that good sweet spot. It's on the cusp of it. And then it stops. And so that's what, when I have these conversations with people, I'm like, listen, I'm a fan of what works for people, but I really feel like that's more of like the Band-Aid where we're treating a symptom and it's not actually getting to the root issue and the root cause of why you have the symptoms to begin with. Yeah. So like, if, it's
a good door opener though. Like somebody's really nervous about doing and committing to ketamine treatments.
Yep.
For sure. But I mean,
or management. Like after ketamine, I always tell people, do ketamine infusions, do the intervention. And then you can use Spravato as management. And if you need to come back for another intervention, we can do it IV, IM, whatever, right?
For sure. Like, listen, what I would love to see them do is like create like an extra, like a dose to push it up a little bit more. Like, so you actually get into that more of like a psychedelic range. I think that would be more beneficial for people. But I also don't think that.
But there's 2 doses, right? And it's like, and they don't look at anything. And coming from an anesthesia background, like we're psychotic with numbers and granulations and things. And it's like, you got 56 milligrams, you got 84 milligrams. and you're going to give the same dose to a 45 pounder versus a 300 pounder. It's like,
course.
no, you're not going to have the same.
Well, that's the one thing about psychedelics, like I guess not specifically even, but like when it really does come to psychedelics, it's like, this is the one thing. I keep on saying the one thing, it's not, but it's like, there is no box that you can fit people in.
Yeah.
You have to treat the individual. When we're at our clinic, we have 115-pound women that need more medicine than 250-pound guys sometimes. And so it's like, when you're even going with this like homogenized dosing protocol, like a lot of clinics will stick to the 0.5 milligrams per kilogram and they're locked and loaded or whatever. It's like, you're going to miss the ball 99% of the time when you're doing that. And especially if you're not titrating the medicine appropriately. So like, this is one thing we do where like we ask a lot of questions when people are coming out of their sessions, and those questions will gauge what the dosage jump will be. So like Dr. Ferber and our nursing staff can meet up and kind of like hand tailor things per individual to make sure we're getting them to the best therapeutic value that we can.
And you have to, right? You titrate them to effect. And people will ask me about like, am I becoming like resistant to the medication? Like, why do I need more? Different things like that. And I always explain it as like a tree. I love trees. I'm really attracted to trees. I'm not really sure why, but they really ground
Maybe
me.
you were a
Tree of
tree in your
life.
past life.
Something. Yeah. Being a tree,
Tree in your
sit
past
there.
life or tree of life.
We just stare at each other, and I admire their strength, and they tell me I'm not completely a loser. But
Give us oxygen.
huh?
Give
I
us
think you need to
Oxygen
tell your tree
deprivation.
story after this.
Oh,
So,
Oh, okay.
but I'll tell people, right? It's like, I'm like, listen, when you came in, you're a tree and your roots are barely in the ground, right? So wind comes, like you're gonna feel it, right? You're gonna feel it. It's like you're bending over with this big wind breeze. And every time you get ketamine, your roots are getting into the system a little bit more, and you're building that
I
resilience.
love
that
this
you need,
analogy.
and I talked to him about that. And it's the same way, like say some days, when Adam hurts my feelings, I'm just kidding. But some days, like
Just ask the AI,
like some days when if you walk by somebody and they're like, you're ugly, you're like, why would somebody say that to me? Like, I don't even know them. Like, why would they say that I'm ugly? And it's like, those are one of the days where you're more sensitive about yourself versus when you're actually in a healthy mindset and somebody's like, you're ugly. You're like, okay, bye. Thanks.
Rude.
Like you don't have that connection. And there's really like 3 levels. It's like way too much empathy, sympathy, to where you're feeling everybody's emotions versus being in the zone to where it's like, no, I'm focused on this. I can hear emotions. I can integrate emotions. That's healthy versus on this side to where I'm nothing but a machine and there are no emotions, right? So it's like the therapeutic window that people have to stay in. And that's really, really hard for us to kind of differentiate that right now because nobody's defined what a therapeutic window for ketamine treatments look like because we're so used to get on this med and take it the rest of your life, and same with psychedelics, right? We got to figure out what is that therapeutic window? When are you mundane versus, how are you too well, right? I mean, are you destroying everything in your life because you've now had this, what you all talk about, the spiritual narcissism? It's like, are you way too much on this pendulum swing or this pendulum swing? And it's like, how do we define in the middle to where it's more integrative medicine and we're truly aligned with, the present time?
yeah.
Take a second.
What about when you take the tree and turn it sideways and have you seen it where it's like looks like lungs?
Oh yeah, upside down.
And it's like, oh my gosh.
We
like
do call it a pulmonary tree.
Like that blew
Yeah.
my mind. And think about like the give and the take from like the carbon dioxide to the oxygen. It's like the lungs of the
That's-
world.
Yeah.
It's the same thing happening. Did you say you had a tree?
Yes.
story?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
tree
well,
story.
no, for
The
The
sure.
ketamine tree
And,
story.
and listen, like that's like with what you're talking about though. That's like my like interpretation of like as above, so below, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's like we're all this reflection of the universe, and like the trees do represent the lungs, and then you can like have eyes that look like certain star systems or nebulae and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Spiral galaxies and
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. So back to the tree parts that Christina wanted me to talk about.
If you want to
Yeah.
talk
Sure,
about
no,
it,
no,
it's a good
everybody
story.
tell a tree
Yeah.
story now.
So when we opened up the clinic, I had Dr. Ferber put me through the sequence of treatments that we were going to be giving our clients, because even though I had some prior ketamine experience that was not in a clinical setting, which wasn't the same, and I don't condone that. I did one of the treatments, and some like amazing things happened to me when I was on this molecule. Okay. And so like one thing is that I started vibrating, like my body was vibrating at like this incredibly high frequency. I do believe that we're vibrational beings. And I tell people, I think that like ketamine and DMT are probably two of the highest vibrational crystals on the planet. And when we take on the vibration of the medicine that like or when we have the medicine in our body takes on the vibration of the medicine. So I was like literally sitting there like, and I needed to ground myself so badly. And so ketamine was different for me because it like didn't completely incapacitate me basically. So like I had our nurse and Christina take me and walk me outside because I was like, I need to ground myself. I need to ground myself. I felt like my body was going to like pop. And so I went outside and I took my shoes off and they walked me over to a tree because that's how I ground myself. And so I put my hands around the tree and like, asked the tree, like, please help me ground myself, take this energy from me. And I kid you not, during this experience, because I was still completely immersed in this ketamine journey, the tree reached down and hugged me and told me, I love you, brother. And I know it sounds completely crazy, but yeah, but it was like, it was
very, story.
very, very different kind of experience. Yeah, for sure. But it wasn't just me hugging the tree. I got the hug back, which was beautiful. So lots of tree stories coming up lately. One of our clients, actually, I was sitting down and helping integrate her after one of her experiences. And she was telling me, she's like, I love trees. She's like, I have like a tree family in my backyard. And so like, I'll go sit down in the morning and I sit with my tree family. And she's like, I really get along with them. They're very nice to me.
They don't talk back.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I would love to ask, like, when we're talking about these journeys that we go on, like I talk about some of the ones that really stuck with me and really, propelled me forward in a different direction in life. And I like asking people, like, are there any like journeys or medicine experiences that you had that were very transformative that like, really changed the trajectory of your life or the view of life that you might have had? And Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, like, I don't really like do them all that frequently. The first one I did in 2016, and then the next one was like 2018, and they were like the Mount Everest, of these journeys. And I don't think I had like, really good preparation. I didn't really know how to surrender. I didn't really know like what I was getting into. And then, yeah, these experiences were absolutely like transformative, like feeling like I grew up in Christian values, in Christian church. And I think my story with ties into this, like the spirituality, like faith part of it, because as I got into the military, as like more of the world like got into me, I got more of a separation from like my faith and my like religion and my upbringing. And when I had to go into the Apache, I've said this, before, it was like, it never felt right to me to like pray for my safety, because then I was like admitting like my own mortality, and that's something I didn't want to confront. So instead I developed this, behavior trait of just like relying on my own like knowledge and like what was material, and in front of me. And, that theme, carried forward and got to a place where I was like very spiritually bankrupt. And I think, with these, ayahuasca first, I began in 5-MeO in 2018. And in both of those in their own way, I went into this like either, presence of God, or able to connect to Christ in a way that I didn't know that you could. And so the tenets of what the scripture says, that I read and understood growing up, like I have a direct, profound experience of that. And I would say that like I'm here today and I do what I do, like try to be a humble servant leader, like, really looking to the model of Christ to show up and exhibit the fruits of the Spirit, which, center around love, joy, peace, understanding, long suffering, which is the word that the Bible uses for patience, which is interesting to me that that's a virtue. And I think like I attribute these experiences for connecting me to something and showing me how much more we are, that I was able to come back like over time. And yeah, I even went back and read the Bible from cover to cover with a set of new spiritual eyes, like just crying like page after page with like insight. And the theme that emerges from it, you know, could even be summarized how the Pharisees like tried to ask Christ, like, which are the most important of the commandments? And he's like, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So clearly it emanates that love is to be had, something greater than yourself, you know, and outside of yourself. And then within that, like, I'm to love you as I love myself. Well, how do I love myself? We have a whole world that's broken, that doesn't know how to love theirself, or somebody that was put in care of them has like betrayed the security and the loving environment obligation they had to that, like our children, you know? And so it's like this pain and trauma and struggle through life in the absence of like what we were supposed to do and what the greatest things were. So, you know, and that's something that, you know, people are talking about, and there's been, you know, studies about this, but yeah, I'm really starting to ask myself questions of, you know, what exactly this means to me and how do I show up more authentically, like with the totality of these things that I've experienced. And, it's quite a journey. I don't have it all figured out. And, you know, I just try and show up with that, you know, loving, you know, gratitude in service. And what I found is that my cup gets filled up more than I could ever dream than if I were trying to seek things, you know, for myself or attain some validation, you know, that I was trying to prove that, you know, I was worthy to be here. And it's pretty remarkable when you can think about it that way.
I love that. You know, it's like I always say, and it's not just me, but like, you know, it's like you can't truly love others until you love yourself, you know? And I think that that's one of the things that psychedelic medicines did for me the most, was like, it gave me the ability to actually love myself enough to want to like better myself and do the proper things that I needed to do in my life. And then through that, now I have the ability to like really like hold space and love other people properly.
And I think it's really like a lot of people that we talk to say that psychedelics bring them closer to God and their religion. And I just feel like it's really something that's to be said about these medicines. And we have a lot of people that comment on our ads and they're like, all you need is God. And that's really, really true. But this is an avenue where some people don't have that closeness to God or source or whatever you want to call it, that can really bring you closer to that and brings you closer together spiritually. And I think it's just
well,
beautiful.
and like, you know, within my community, the veteran community, I think it's not that people are like opposed to God. It's that they've had to go and do the worst things as a human. Like, we're not designed to go and kill other humans.
And then we don't
and
give
do
you a
those-
safe avenue to reintegrate
Right.
all of that. You have to be this machine, and
Yeah.
then you come back and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I find my old self again?
Right.
You
And
know-
then it works into your subconscious programming, and then it becomes like the way that you exist and be. And you can want that relationship, but until you're able to step into that altered state and be able to take that intention in there and begin to start to unwind those things. And so that's like why like we've seen people who are ready to kill themselves because they've tried literally everything else. So we're not saying like, you know, this for everybody at all times.
And I don't think that at all. I
right,
don't think
right.
psychedelics for everyone. Like, I think that there's a time and a place, and it has to be done safely and correctly, or else it can be so harming.
You know, it's funny. I think like these compounds have the ability to turn atheists into believers. I mean, like there was a guy.
Yeah, let
Rogan,
that sink in.
There's like, and we have that kind of stuff. It's funny, like a couple of our partners, there are two gentlemen that are Jewish, and so one of them did a treatment at the facility, and he came out of it, and he's like, so she's like, so I just met Jesus, and he's like, and he gave me this big hug. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. And then the other guy, I was like, that's amazing, right? The other one's like, he's like, no, you don't get it, Charles. He's Jewish. And I'm like, I think Jesus was too, man. You know?
Sounds like the right dude.
Yeah. He's like, he's a really good hugger, though. Like, that's amazing.
Oh no, he's
man.
like, the guy gives great hugs.
Yeah, yeah. You know? But so what about you, Kathryn or Katie? What do you have any experiences that really stuck with you that were very profound that like, you know, changed you?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I saw macrodosed psilocybin back in 2022, and before before I tell that story, let's talk about the spiritual thing. Because I was talking to a minister in the Apple store one day that I found. Like,
As one does.
if
Yeah.
you don't know me, I will talk to a wall.
So will
Sometimes.
Charles.
Yes. You get long
Or a
grain.
tree.
Yeah.
Or a tree.
Well, he's standing in the grocery line. He's like, yeah, so we do ketamine therapy.
You have no idea how much ketamine I've sold in grocery lines
Yeah.
and in the sauna at the
That's
gym.
awesome.
I'm sorry. Do you want to talk about the weather?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there talking to this guy, and he's asking me about psychedelics. And I was talking to somebody about this a few weeks ago. I'm like, all right, it's not going to be me. I don't have the mindset to do this necessarily right now. But somebody needs to do it, because it's like either you don't believe in God and you're agnostic, you're atheist or whatever, or you grew up in the church, you understand the religious structure that's intended to lead you to God. There's no book for people who don't believe in God and then they see God.
Mm,
There's no path.
right.
And we don't know how to verbalize, like, what is
Right.
that? It's like, oh, now you're spiritual. There's
Yeah.
God,
Right.
But it's like, I don't want to like drop those people off because we've not paved that path for them yet as to what that looks like, and because, if you're like, no, we're like, it's like dust, there's nothing else left. And then all of a sudden you feel this over empowering love and energy and everything else. It could create a really significant, type of confusion that may be leading to the spiritual narcissism. Maybe
Sure.
they didn't believe in God, so now they become God,
Right.
and it's like somebody needs to write that manual, to a point. I don't have the time. I think, Adam, yeah, you're quite busy. But anyway,
Book number 2.
Yeah.
you're right. There you go. So I macrodosed psilocybin back in October of 2022. Very low time in my life. And, and I was ready, right? I was rock bottom when I went into this experience. And you hear all these therapists that I've been around. I've probably been around 100 therapists now. Some I love, some I can't get aligned with. Others I close my eyes because I'm trying to hear their language because their language is so different than mine. And now, we found some really amazing therapists and I'm much more integrated with them. But people hear about situations I've been in life and they're like, it's going to catch up to you one day. Like, that's what you hear, right? It's going to catch up to you. And you're like, okay. So I go in, right, to my macro dosing. I'm like, well, here it comes. Rock bottom. Let's invite it all in. So, so I had 3 topics on my mind, my brother's death, my mom's death, and my divorce. And, and I never went to therapy for my brother, more so just self, stuff with me. My family didn't believe in therapy. And then my mom had freshly passed, 6 weeks prior. And then the divorce was, the divorce request was like 3 weeks prior. So, and here I am having a 14-year-old single mom, things like that. So, I go into the experience and I'm like, these are my intentions. I'm like, all right, let's process it, right? Let's process my brother's death. Because who was it? I had a manager. I invite weird comments throughout my life. I had a manager when I was in the ICU, or cardiac ICU when I was a nurse. And she knew my brother. I actually worked in the ICU where my brother died. And she just walks up to me and she's like, just something's wrong with you. Like, I don't think you've ever processed your brother's death. And that's something you really probably should do one day. Where the hell did that come
Yeah,
from? I'm like, I'm just sitting here. And the nurse next to me, right?
Yeah.
She starts crying. She knew my brother. And she's crying. And I'm like, yeah, they just let her go. Like, she's just nuts. But anyway. So I'm like, well, people have told me I've not processed this, not processed my mom, all this other stuff. So I go into it expecting, who knows? And I have that intention. I'm like, all right, let's start with my brother. And there's nothing there. Like, literally nothing there. It was like an empty chapter. It's like that book has already gone, closed, good. Same with my mom. I was like, well, I guess I processed everything. And then I thought about, with my husband's stuff too. And, and that was gone. But really what my experience started out with was, it was me whining. That I'm lonely. Like, I'm alone. Like, I'm when you're a single mom, and I was like 38, I guess, when going through this, you're just like, what's wrong with me? Like, why is all this coming, to me? So you have a lot of that self-reflection stuff too. But, as I kind of shared my story the other day. Like, I went into it. I mean, God and I talked. It was more me whining and complaining and cursing. And
Katie, that was like 10 podcasts ago, okay?
was it? So yeah,
That was 12 years ago.
yeah. So it was like, and I went through all of this, and it was like, basically what's my purpose? And, God and I, we went to the pyramids. We were down seeing people, and it was talking about people suffering. And there was, they were looking for love and acceptance and leadership and guidance. And that, that I was supposed to be this protector of God's mission. God made it very clear that it was not my mission, but it was God's mission. And, and I kept on saying, like, what if I fail? Like, what if I fail? What if I effing fail? And I kept saying, I probably said that like 40 times, right? And God's like, you're not going to fail. You're not going to fail. And, God was like, I'm going to put all these people around you, and you're going to protect the mission, and this is what you're going to do. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I was like, what if I fail? And I'm sitting there, right? This is in Jamaica when I did this. And I'm sitting there, and I feel my head like get shoved up. And it's like, you're not going to fail. And I'm like looking at the clouds. I'm like, all right, got it. But I was so focused, right? I mean, that was the thing about it. And that's, that's the validation that I got, right? It was just like, there's nothing for me to think about, like with this. It was just, I was told I'm to execute this mission, and there's going to be a group of people around it that are going to help to protect the mission, because people are looking for love and guidance and acceptance and things like that. And, and it's all about helping people. It's not about leading them or guiding them. It's, you're walking with them in the storm kind of
People
thing.
helping people. That's been my new quote lately.
Yeah, that's what it is, and it's not about any one person, right? These people who are like, they need to follow me. They need to do this. It's like, no, they don't.
You're
Like, what do
co-leader.
they need? Right. What do they need? How can you best support them? And there's a very big difference in being a servant leader than being, this egocentric leader. And servant leaders, we're scrubbing the toilets. You all know that. I mean, like with the ketamine. And, people ask me, like, I'll be at the clinic. I try not to go to the clinic much because I distract people. And like, I'll be like over here working on an AI bot. They're taking care of patients. I'm like, guys, we got this great thing. They're like, don't talk to the staff. I'm like, okay.
or the patient.
Just the bot.
So I'll come in, I'll have my hoodie on, no makeup. And they're like, do you work here? I'm like, yeah. Like, what do you do? And I'm like, I just help them as they need things.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, she's the CEO. And I'm like, don't do it.
I know. I don't put my cards out. I'm like, I don't want people knowing who I am. There's an issue. Don't come to me.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's interesting. But yeah, no, I mean, it's, psilocybin, not only did it change my life, right, but it validated my purpose. And that was a big thing. I was like, why am I going through all this stuff? And God was like, because it's time for you to run. I cut all your strings holding you back. And, and there's certain things that like were said to me during that time. And I'm just like that, like, I wouldn't even say that to myself, So yeah, so it's pretty fascinating.
It's funny because like everybody always talks about setting intentions. Okay. And like, and we do, like, we have some of our team members who are integration specialists, and like they sit down with our clients and they do pre and post integration, and before as the pre-integration, they're like, let's set some intentions. And it's funny though, because like these compounds are intelligent compounds. It's like you can set one intention and it just takes you in a completely different direction. And it's like, I call them intelligent because the medicine doesn't necessarily give you what you want. It gives you what you need a lot of the time. And it's like, I think that a lot of this mental health issue that we have as like a whole is because people don't know what their purpose is. It's like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And I find that a lot of people that do these deeper dives with psychedelics come back with that clarity. It's like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like the medicine tells you this is what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, and I'm very aligned with what you said, because that was literally what was said to me, is like, you are on a mission, like you are on a divine mission that is going to help people heal. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to get yourself together in order to be a part of this mission. You need to sober up. You need to quit taking drugs. You need to do this, that, and the other thing. And, I always go back to, like, when you're talking about this, like the servant leaders, right? It's like, it's what Ram Dass said, man. And like, this is the best way I feel like I can be a part of that, is that like, all I can do is work on me. And like, and all you can do is work on you. And the way that I encourage people to keep on working on themselves is by continuously working on me. And so it's almost like that's how I feel like we're going to be of the best service and lead the best way, is to emulate or embody what we're preaching and what we're trying to convince people that they should be doing as well. So it's like, it's like, I know for me personally, I respect and follow people that walk the walk, that are actually doing the deal. It's like, even like, listen, like, when you go to AA or something and they're telling you like, go look for a sponsor, who will, your sponsor would be somebody that's living the way that you would want to live. And so it's like, that's why I have to keep on showing up and continuously working on myself every day, because then if I'm not doing what I need to be doing, then people aren't going to respect me or listen to me,
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think, some of the stuff Katie was saying with like, the spiritual narcissist, if you're able to take these and you go and you connect to these profound experiences, these divine experiences, you're able to give and receive a hug from Jesus. You're living off grid, you're talking to trees and things like that. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is something like really powerful. Like there's really something here. And you know what, actually this is all kind of like flowing to me. I've like tapped into like something really special here. And you know what? We need to like bring like a secret council together, and we need to be the secret like stewards of this. And I feel like in some way, shape, or form, like that's where this has gone wrong several times, in the past, versus what is this other thing that we're talking about? It's like letting this, these experiences and these insights like come to us, like process it. And then the things that start happening when you say like, okay, if I can truly be and do anything with my conscious awareness, like what am I going to give myself to? And the greatest thing that you can give yourself to is service, like service to others. It's the greatest form of like creation. And, I think the ability to do that lets this thing flow through you instead of to you. And then it's, with that, what can you go and vision and build? And I think, for me, it's incremental. Like you can't do everything like all at once. Like you can't go to the end of your life and say like all those things and experiences and things that got you to there, I can achieve all in like 1 year. So it's these like incremental steps to it. And I think it's less about, for me, the tactical thing that we're doing, and more like I needed to create this container of like how to exist. And within that, it was like, I had the ability to overcome like the worst of what I experienced in life. And out of that, like this state of internal peace, like was achieved. And within that, like I found my purpose to be able to be an expression of the earth shattering love that was like flowing through me. And what if I could show up in every encounter and every interaction to the best of my ability, like as that, like giving myself wholly to that, neighbor that also needs the love. And if that were the case, then how could I start to work on things to help other individuals like achieve the same things within themselves? And what would those programs be? Knowing that humanity is hurting and knowing that the earth is also hurting because of what humanity has done to it. And then saying that like, if we're able to do that with some kind of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual balance, and there's all these like desirable characteristic traits, or in scripture, fruits of the spirit, or positive energy, or these loved based, not fear based ways of existing. And then it's like, I had this beautiful container built. And then I was like, but what goes in the middle? And like, that's the joy of what I wake up to each day. It's like, what goes in the middle of this architecture that I built. And it's led me to like, this room right here, having this conversation with you guys and getting to learn about all the beautiful ways in which you're serving and building. And then same thing with Katie and what she's doing. And then I just look out and say, you know what, like I want to build better systems with the best people on the planet with, loving value system, as opposed to like trying to accumulate the most amount of wealth and resources because that person wants to have $100 million, yacht because of that. And it's like, that's the world we live in right now. And it's such disparity between the extreme top and the bottom. And we lost, you know, touch with that. We're these incredible human beings that all have this, you know, divine intrinsic traits and soul. And we've got disconnected from that. And so
when we first got in this industry, like when we're talking about the spiritual narcissism, right? I told Christina, I was just like, I'm so excited for this because there's going to be so many beautiful people and everybody's going to love each other. And because the answer is always love, right?
Right.
And like,
yeah.
and like, you know, everybody knows that we're all one and you know, this and that. And so, and then all of a sudden
Reality hit.
we were like, we were definitely like some real underdogs when it came to it, just because we didn't have the background. We took the leap of faith. We were literally like lone wolves in this thing. And I started meeting people, and people were so mean and so nasty to us. And like even people like I respected like from afar, and then I'd meet them and I'd be like, you know, they tell you don't put your heroes on a pedestal or whatever and stuff like that, because you'll always get let down. And the thing is that like it was crazy because like I was like we were wondering, like, you know, how come not everybody, but like a lot of people were really, really nasty to us, and I couldn't figure it out why. And then all of a sudden I went to like, this is God showing you right now. Like, you guys don't have a bunch of VC money. You don't have some multi-million-dollar organization. So people are kissing your ass basically and stuff like that, which does happen a lot. What?
We're not shiny.
Yeah, we're not shiny. So we got to see a lot of people's true colors, you know? And there's no judgment. It's cool. Everybody's where they're at, and that's fine. But like, I have to say that like for a while now, I've been saying to Christina, like, when are we gonna like I just want to work with good people, you know, like I really just want to like,
They gotta be out there somewhere.
yeah, like where are
Where are they?
yeah, where is everybody? Because I
In
know,
our bubble.
yeah, because like I know that there's good people that are really out for the right reasons, that are genuinely like coming from a heart-centered, loving place. And you know, and I have to tell, like, you know, everybody that's listening to this, like, a few years ago, or almost a few years ago, I was at a conference in Miami, and I was listening to Katie speak on stage with a bunch of people, and it was about ketamine. And, you know, this was like, especially back when like there weren't a lot of people that had a ton of respect for us back then, or were being fake nice to us by any means, because they weren't being nice. But you were very nice to me. And that stuck with me. And I told Christina that. I was like, she was really nice to me. She's a genuinely good person. I felt it from an energetic standpoint. And then I got to meet you yesterday, Adam. And I was just like, I was talking about you a lot last night.
Like a lifetime ago. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was at least 12 podcasts.
I mean, it was so crazy listening to you walk through your story, and, you know, so many reflections, and the way that you experienced it, thought about it, analyze it, and have been like going through. And it, like, I know. And then like there's Christina, I was like,
Big
I want to learn about you. And you're like, no, you guys just keep broing down.
Yeah.
But it was, man. And I felt it like immediately, like from you as well.
100%. And so like, it was funny because like we have a couple of partners that we're working with on some other stuff right now. And like, they're good guys too. Like, but like they, you know, they're like, we don't physically get to be around them much. They're not here locally or anything and stuff. And we were in the car last night after we like were all here yesterday, and I go, is it happening? I was like, is it really happening? I was like, are we actually like meeting the right people that we're going to end up probably doing some amazing work with and helping a lot of people together? And she's like, I'm not going to get too excited, but it feels good. She's like, it feels really good, you know? And so like, I got to tell you guys, like, I'm really excited about meeting some people that I feel like I'm really aligned with, that I know that are out for the betterment of humanity, and that I feel like that are coming together. Like, you know, like, listen, like I saw you guys down in the Virgin Islands recently and stuff. And it's like, I feel like everybody's being brought together. Like you had an amazing group of people down there. I know you're doing work with psilocybin down there, and like, and then all of a sudden I'm like watching from afar, and then, you know, here we are, you're like a couple days later, we're sitting in the podcast studio,
12 hours later.
Yeah. 12 hours, 12
later.
podcasts later.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to understand that, but it's okay.
Yeah. And so it's like, I have to say it's a pleasure and an honor to be in the same space with both of you right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, receive it, but like reciprocate it too, and feel the exact same way. And I think like having done this work in some capacity or another for the last 10 years, it always hasn't been like puppies and rainbows, and it's certainly not now. And but when you can find the right heart-centered people, like the people that have the vision and the mission and the capability and want to do it like the right way, like I couldn't agree with like Katie more. Like, how can we lift each other up? How can we support one another? And like, let's just also recognize that, we're leaders in very uncertain times doing something that not many people, and is very like taboo. And a lot of times you can feel like you're in isolation and like you're alone. And it's so incredible that you guys have each other in that. And that's one of the things that I really advocate for within our group that advocates, but it's for you as like the individual leader, and that like we're to be like, in relationship and friends with one another, to be there when it's good and bad. Cause like oftentimes we're having to make like really complex decisions and think through things, whether it's for state policy or federal policy, or, navigating the complexities of like
Or being a dad.
or being a dad. Yeah. Like all those things. And so like we put our heads down and we do the work because it's the greatest expression of self that we have. And then you meet these incredible people on the way. And then every now and then something like, the Virgin Islands materializes, and it can be very powerful, and it can be very emotional. And it's this time, space, coordinate, key milestone, anchor event that's like, wow. And then like, you have to stay practical and grounded after things like that, right? Going back to these experiences, if you let it go to your head, then you're going to be the person that thinks flow to instead of through. And so it's like, you can only stay really humble about it when you have a good counsel, good friends, and good people that are approaching it with a service mindset. And I think that's where the world and other people have got it wrong in the past. And it's the hard path, it's the Christ-centered path. And it's a daily, practice. So thank you so much for that, and for having us on your guys' podcast. It's been a pleasure and honor.
No,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you for being on the show, both of you. I think this was a really amazing episode.
I just really want to ask. Sorry, I just got to circle it back to spiritual experiences and ketamine, and you working in the ER. And I don't want to discredit anybody's experience or what they think may have happened to them, but I have had a theory. When people have these NDEs, near-death experiences, and ketamine, so when they're on the operating table, do you think they're really NDEs, or do you think maybe it was the ketamine that
Oh, that's a good
facilitated
question.
that experience?
Like during the anesthesia?
Yeah.
When they're on the table?
And they say they have these experiences where they speak to God and they meet God.
Bad anesthesia, if they feel like they died during anesthesia. Provider. You know what? No,
What do you think?
I've never had people talk to me about near-death experiences while they were under. I've had them talk to me about how, like, they could feel a saw, like, cut their chest
Ugh.
open.
Oh,
Sounds awful.
no.
Bad anesthesia, Katie.
No, that was when I was an ICU nurse, and and I was like, they'd tell me that. I was like, you can't remember that. And actually, yeah, the biggest recall cases are right there. It's C-sections, traumas, and then open heart surgery. But yeah, you don't usually see the near-death experiences with people. More
I've
so,
heard about them.
yeah, right, yeah. But more so when people come out, right? That's when you're, because you're putting them into a vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they come out, that's really where I see their vulnerability the most. Like the one, there's a hilarious story of a CRNA that I worked with. She's amazing. She should be a comedian. But she was talking about how he's an MMA guy, right? He's getting his tonsils done. And then he's laying on the bed. She said, next thing I know, he's standing on the bed. Like, he pops up out of anesthesia. He's standing on the bed. He doesn't know anybody around him.
Oh,
He, like,
Lord.
pulls out
Oh my
his
gosh,
IV.
that's so terrifying.
Jumping off the bed while it's like the stretcher's like rolling, she's like, there's blood everywhere. The cops are getting called. Nobody can contain the MMA guy.
Where's the hell doll?
Yeah. So he eventually, reoriented himself. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, me personally, like the near-death experiences, the only time I've seen those, and unfortunately, I'm sure people appreciated this, it's the people that died from, something called your LAD. It's a widowmaker. It's a certain vessel in your heart, right?
Mhm.
And when that little guy closes up, you have a pretty high chance of dying, and you go down pretty quick. So if somebody recognizes that you go down, you get CPR. We keep you cold for about 24 hours, and then we wake you up. And that's when they would get the Katie interview.
Mm.
Do you remember anything? What was it like?
Yeah.
You know? And I never got anybody who told me, you know, that they had that, they saw the light. I mean, maybe they saw the light and they came back, but anytime they did see the light, it was always warm and very accepting, you know?
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing, and this is what I tell people, especially, you know, that lose loved ones, a lot of times people get so stuck on they were suffering, right? And it is nasty. I don't know if you've ever been around anybody that's died. You know, there's a lot of just physical nasty stuff that goes on. And family members are like, oh, they're suffering. Oh, they're struggling. Oh, all this stuff. And they don't. And I don't know if it's God. I don't know what it is, but there's a certain protective measure in our brain to where the person never remembers that, right? Like at all. It's just the people on the outside. So I had this, you know,
Kind of like a K-hole.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I had this one guy, right? He was running. I think he was 44 or so. He was running. He fell over, died for a while, and everybody got him back. And I was asking him, I was like, do you remember running? Like, and he was running through the hospital parking lot when he fell over, right? So timing's great. And he said the only thing he remembered was eating cereal with his child before he went to drop her off prior to school. And that was like 4 hours before his heart stopped.
Interesting.
You know, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is with that. I think you are more consciously aware when you have ketamine and you feel that near-death experience. I also think, though, that when people have those ego deaths, it's a detachment from whatever negative they've become associated with, right? So it's not, I'm a person living with depression. It's, I'm a depressed person, and that depressed person becomes enmeshed. So when they're sitting there and that true depression, right, leaves, you feel dead because your identity just changed. Depression's gone,
deep.
anxiety's gone, PTSD's gone. And they feel like they just died.
Yeah.
Man, you gave me some crazy insights. One of my most challenging, you know, experiences, and that resonates a lot with me.
Yeah.
Because before I was like, you know, I am this like thing, and now just even kind of reframing it, the potentiality of it was me leaving this thing.
Yeah.
This paradigm.
During ketamine treatments, I always feel like you die, but then you come back, and that's you just shutting off whatever that is, and then you come back a little bit lighter, a different version of you on a different timeline or whatever.
Yeah, I was a little tiny ball. I did ketamine. I've done ketamine. Floating around in my own little happy space. But I did ketamine. I've done it twice. I did IV with them while they were doing a massage. They were trying to do some
Oh, I've heard about that.
burnout.
Sign me up.
That was interesting. It was really interesting because when
How
they're
much
like
did they
rubbing
give
on you, 75. But when they were like rubbing on me here, it's like I had a leg, I had no leg, like, you know, because it's a dissociative agent.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like different parts of my body were missing, even though I knew they were there. So that one was fine.
When I had an epidural, that was the weirdest sensation. How like half of my body was just
Not there.
not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
Epidurals are amazing. But yeah, I got done with that and I was sitting there and I was like, I know I have a call with the lawyer at like 6. And like I opened my eye because I can barely see anything. And it was like 6:03 and I was like, oh God, I got to get up. So here I'm like on the call. I'm like, all right, come on, you know, on the call with the lawyer talking about, you know, different things. And but I did that one. I also did Awaken. Awaken does, I don't know if you guys know Awaken. They did
The
with
class.
AUD stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was my first ketamine when I did their training, and then I had to get a shot. That was like 100 milligram shot. I was out like for like an hour and 48 minutes. But I got him to record
Did you
me.
black out? You remember anything?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was
Oh yeah, the little dot.
Yeah.
Here's
Space dust.
universe. Here's Katie. Around. But yeah, no, but but the thing about, you know, ketamine as compared to psilocybin, me personally, I think ketamine is shorter acting and stronger acting than psilocybin.
Yep.
Yes.
I think psilocybin is much more of and I tell people, right? Like I think ketamine's kind of a one chapter book. I think psilocybin is kind of like a 10 chapter book. And the beautiful thing about psilocybin is you can kind of walk through it and then you go back to the beginning. You remember what you were thinking about and then you go back and you can kind of recalculate those things. But with ketamine, it's like you're here. Like you're gone.
You're on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gone, and it was funny, right? Because I was on ketamine. I was sitting there and I was like over here in my little like black world, like floating around, and I kept on seeing the word seek, like the light up sign, like one of the light up signs that he has right there, like one of those signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it said like seek over here, and I'd be like, I'm focused over here, and I'm doing something over here, and then I saw the word like seek again. And I was like, okay, whatever, seek again. And I'm over here doing something else. And I see seek for the third time. And I'm like, okay, fine. Seek's got some significance to it. I will look it up when I get out. And buddy, if you want to talk about the Bible and spirituality,
Seek and you'll find.
look up the word seek. Spiritual meaning of seek. And it was cool, right? But but I get the seek, which is like the big powerhouse versus with psilocybin, I wrote, 6 pages. With psilocybin. So it's
One word, 6 pages.
seek 6 pages. Yeah. It's I don't know. I don't know about the near death or the near death experiences and things like that. But I do think that people, especially with the ego deaths, they lose their identity, but they're intended to lose that identity because it's a negative identity.
Yeah.
Alcoholics are one of the hardest ones to treat because they're so good with being in an altered mind state. So they're like doing well. Yeah, I'm plateauing, and I'm always like, don't worry, I'll get you there. And intentionally, I'm like, and we're going through the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Because what you have to do with people who are used to working in an altered mind,
Right.
you've got to get them past the level of what they can control in that altered mind. And that's how they find themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, it's neat, but you all know, like it's amazing.
Ketamine did for my symptoms what none of the other compounds accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I've had oneness experiences and burning bush experiences on psilocybin and DMT and like very enlightening experiences. But when I did 7 treatments when we opened up the clinic, and I was taking like a couple 100 milligrams of RSO, and I'd wake up in the morning, like, it's way too much. But the
Let's
thing,
take a rice grain.
yeah,
for comparison.
but the thing is that like I was doing it to medicate my PTSD, and then all of a sudden after I did the ketamine treatments, cannabis didn't do what it did to me anymore. It was like just getting me whacked, like super stoned, wasn't productive, stuff like that. And so it was like ketamine was like the icing on the cake for me. And I think that's, for people that are suffering from severe symptoms of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and stuff like that, ketamine is probably one of the best options for you out there.
And think about ketamine. When you all were talking about this earlier, I was picturing this in my head. There's like Eastern medicine and there's Western medicine, and ketamine is right in the middle.
Yep.
And that's probably why it's so hard for us to like prove a point, because Eastern medicine, it's plant medicine, it's all natural. Western medicine, what are you doing? You're giving them what? So it's like ketamine literally is like right in the middle of both worlds. And here we are trying to push this agenda, and it doesn't fit with either or. It's its own entity.
We always say our clinic is where science meets spirituality.
And where East meets West.
Yeah.
You're right.
Spot on.
Right in the middle. And if we can do it right, we can get everybody to be at one with themselves in the present time. And that's how you heal, and that's how you grow.
For sure.
Well, I think it's impressive to see how you guys are doing it. And I think we need more people like you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was another amazing episode. And if nobody's told you that they love you lately,
We do.